Hello, thank you very much, everybody, for joining the webinar. It's Richard Harris from the Sales Hacker Group, along with a couple of very good and close friends from ActOn. We're very excited everybody is here today and hope that all of you are, we appreciate everybody taking a little bit of time during the month of December to join a webinar focused on sales and marketing and how to increase revenue. So let's go ahead and get started. So real quick on ActOn Software, if you guys have not seen this tool, it's a pretty amazing tool. One of the advantages for what I get to do, I get to see a lot of tools out in the marketplace, and there are definitely tools and there are definitely toys. This is most definitely a tool. It's also a lot of fun, but you'll get a lot of value out of this. ActOn Software provides the leading sales and marketing engagement platform for the 21st century business, and it's designed to cultivate and engage your customers at every stage of the buying journey, from attracting the new prospects to building brand advocates. It's really simple to easy to operate and powerful in its results. It's also got an elegant and outstanding user experience that's both comprehensive in its functionality. ActOn's cloud solution powers over 3,000 customers at this stage, and in their engagement efforts across all stages of the customer life cycle, to attract, capture, nurture, convert, and expand. The platform's out-of-the-box integrations with popular standalone tools are further complemented by ActOn Anywhere, a business productivity application that extends the use of marketing automation across web-based environments. ActOn supports an open marketing ecosystem and enables businesses to take full advantage of the latest tools and services available in the context of an integrated engagement and targeting platform. So to put it pretty simply from my perspective, it really is an amazing tool to truly help you make and allow marketing and sales to communicate and work well together, right? Finally, dogs and cats can live together in the same house without causing too much chaos. So would like to go ahead and do a couple of quick introductions. Of course, my name is Richard Harris. I'm owner of the Harris Consulting Group, also the director of sales consulting and training at Sales Hacker. So if folks are ever looking for trainers to come in for either one day, a sales kickoff, or an ongoing engagement, that's what I help people do. Also on the line, we have Kevin Bobowski, who's the VP of Demand Gen at ActOn Software, and Ryan Porter, who is the Director of Sales at ActOn Software. Gentlemen, you guys want to say hello real quick?
Hey everyone, this is Kevin Bobowski, excited to join. Richard, thanks for the nice intro, and excited to jump in here.
Sure.
And this is Ryan Porter, really happy to be here. We've got the talent, the brains, and the mouth, and I think I'm the mouth in that triumvirate.
Well, we'll have to see how that goes today. We'll have to see. So a couple of things real quick. I do want to, Kevin and Ryan, if you guys want to give out your email addresses or an easy way for people to contact you on Twitter, just in case additional questions that might come up after we get off the line later today, this might be a good time to do that real quick.
Sure. My email address is kevin.bobowski at acton.net, and that's my email address.
And I am ryan.porter at act-on.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's jump right into it. And folks, if you are on the line and you do have questions, obviously there'll be a little bit of time at the end for questions to come up, but we do want to encourage engagement immediately. So please feel free to type your questions in the little box area, and we will jump to those as quickly as we can and try and get through all of them. The last thing I want to do is I like to tell people about these webinars is that we like to try and keep them active and live, and that's a little bit of a challenge given the technology, but it's also awesome that we can do it. So I have a little bit of a no bullshit policy whenever I do stuff like this, which basically means that if you guys have a question or you're not understanding what Kevin or Ryan is explaining, or even if you want to question them, please do it professionally. Don't be rude about it. But let's try to check egos and bullshit at the door so that we can make sure that everyone gets something wonderful out of this webinar today. So with that being said, I guess the first question goes, if you look at what sales and marketing alignment, we hear all these terrible things about sales doesn't like marketing, marketing doesn't like sales, the leads suck, no, the leads don't suck, you couldn't close a barn door, whatever it is. From y'all's perspective and what you guys have been able to accomplish, how are you making this, better? How do you implement this?
Why don't I go ahead and take that one first, Kevin? So the funny thing about the idea of why it's critical, I'm remembering a story of a rep sitting in my office complaining about how all the leads were garbage and a waste of time. And I called him back in and I said, I have really good news for you. I've pulled you out of the lead spinner. You're not going to get any more of those garbage leads that are wasting your time. And his face that turned white as he looked at me and he said, well, then how am I going to hit my number? And it's funny because I've never heard a sales rep ever say, I don't want any more leads. And I've never heard a marketing professional say, I don't want sales to bring in any revenue from my leads. So it is as obvious as that both groups absolutely need each other. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into what creates the divide, but it's absolutely essential to healthy revenue and healthy growth.
Yeah, and Ron, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think you have to have the alignment, and I think there's two things that we're seeing in the market, not just specific to ActOn, but I think in the entire industry as a whole. I think number one is there are a lot of competitors out there, a lot of companies that claim to do the same thing, and that makes it harder, I think, for the sales team to close deal, and it makes it harder for marketers to differentiate their story. And then I think the other thing that makes alignment so critical, because you really need a team to be successful when you're in highly competitive environments. But I think the other part is just with the rise of marketing technology and the rise of sales technology, the marketing team has more visibility and more impact across the entire sales funnel than they've ever had before. And I love that because I think it's driving a lot of really good opportunities for partnership and alignment between sales and marketing.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, guys. So, these are the key trends that are coming from, that have been noticed from you guys, if I'm not mistaken. You guys did a study earlier this year talking about different attitudes and opinions from different marketing and sales professionals, and just trying to get a sense of, what are the things that people could sort of walk away with just based on this one study? I see there's a couple of things on the screen, but what are some of the aha moments you guys discovered? And Kevin, why don't we let you answer that question first?
It really comes back to support our previous comment about the importance of sales and marketing alignment. It's just not pie in the sky or apple pie and something that's just basic. It's actually rooted in fact. And when we did this study, we evaluated or surveyed, I think, over 350 marketers and sales professionals. And basically, we asked them a series of questions. 81% of the companies that beat their revenue goals described that they had great alignment or solid alignment with their sales organizations. And then, as you could expect, the people that didn't hit their revenue goals, there was very little alignment. So not only is it important at a theoretical level, but quantitatively, we've really shown that companies that are aligned produce better and generate and hit their revenue goals. And a lot of that is around organizations that have done a very good job implementing technology such as marketing automation like ActOn or CRM solutions. And we'll talk a little bit more about what you need to be thinking about as you implement some of these technologies so that both sales and marketing are successful.
Cool. Awesome. So, just real quick, I want to let everybody know that people will be able to get a copy of this survey and this alignment survey that ActOn put together at the end of this webinar today. And we want to make sure that people realize this isn't just a total sales pitch for ActOn. This is definitely trying to speak about this at a higher level than that. So just keep that in mind as we go through all of these things. So, what creates the divide in general? Like, you sort of, if you step back and take a look at the whole picture, right, it's almost inherent when you build the sales and marketing teams that maybe they naturally distrust each other. I'm not sure, but I'd love for one of you guys to jump in and answer that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and handle this first, because this opens up an area where I think some organizations try to attack a problem that's more than a technology problem with technology. But sales and marketing divide is not just because of tools or technology. It's because oftentimes the marketing team sits in a different location than the sales team, and that creates a natural divide. They meet in different meetings than the sales team. And the sales team will use different tools than the marketing team. And they'll socialize differently. When they're going out to lunch, they go out with marketing people, will go out with marketing people, and salespeople go out with salespeople. And it creates an us versus them natural grouping, natural human communal relationship. So when you're looking at trying to truly align sales and marketing, I would argue that it's not just technology, because if only you implement technology and you don't address the other social areas, you still will have at least a component, if not a major component, in creating that divide between the two groups.
Yeah. You know, Ryan, as we were prepping for this webinar, Ryan and I spent a few minutes talking about it earlier this week. You actually brought up a couple of other interesting points, too. And I think one of them is, I think in general, sales has to be more short-term and near-term focused because they're evaluated on a quarterly basis. I think marketers tend to have a longer view of things as well. And I think that creates a little conflict. The marketer might be thinking a year or two out. The salesperson is thinking about the next 45 days. So I think that's actually a really big part of this divide. The other part, and Ryan, you and I see this almost every day when we talk with customers and prospects of the company, but I think goals are really important. I know we're going to talk about goals in a second, but I think one of the other big pieces that divides both sales and marketing is when they're not operating on the same level and the same set of goals.
Yeah, that brings up a really good point, because I talk about this a lot with clients. I do a lot of training with SDRs, those sales development reps who either take the inbounds or do the outbound prospecting. And one of my first questions is, show me a copy of your SLA between sales and marketing. And oftentimes people have something, but it's never written down. And it's interesting when I say, okay, everybody write it down. I'll ask the marketing person to give it to me and the salesperson to give it to me. And they both think they're right because that's what they both think they've heard, but they've never actually officially put it down and gotten the head of marketing and the head of sales to agree that this is what a suspect is, this is what a prospect is, this is what the cadence will be, this is when it goes from an MQL to an SAL, a marketing qualified lead to a sales accepted lead to a sales qualified lead. So I think that aside from that physical divide that you're talking about, really having a contract between the two groups absolutely will bridge this divide in a huge, huge way. So when you guys are creating the shared goals, what metrics matter, right? It's all about metrics and KPIs. And I knew in some ways the metrics have changed a lot more for marketing in the last 5 years than maybe they did for sales, right? It's always been smile and dial and pound the phones and, meetings will continue until morale improves. What are the metrics marketing's maybe looking at as it relates to sales and vice versa now?
Yeah, Richard, I think you're right on. I think over the last several years, marketing has really changed what their goals are. And when I talk with other marketers or I talk with CEOs of companies and they talk about having a demand gen problem, I always dig a little bit deeper, ask some more questions. And most often, marketers are still measuring leads, I think end up not having good alignment with sales. And I hate to say this as a marketer, I know this is recorded, so I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but isn't it interesting how marketers always seem to hit their lead goal on the last day of the quarter and it's always exactly right? And the reality is leads are good, and certainly they're important, and they're the lifeblood of a company, but it's a number that can be manipulated based on definitions and how you bring in leads. And I think for a marketer to be successful today, you have to think about your department as your team as a profit center. And if you think about it as a profit center, you really need to be measuring revenue and your contribution to your revenue goals as a company. That, I believe, will drive the most sales and marketing alignment that you could possibly get.
I agree with Kevin, and it's funny because you talk about leads, and this also creates a little bit of that divide, because when a salesperson thinks of a lead, they can think of someone that is interested. They don't think of it in terms of a marketing qualified lead versus a sales qualified lead versus a marketing accepted lead versus a sales accepted lead. So as you look at creating goals and metrics that are meaningful, I think it comes down to 4 really important things. Number 1, the goal has to be simple to understand. It has to be simple and basic. Number 2, it has to be true and honest. Number 3, it has to be accurate. And number 4, it has to be meaningful. Having too many goals where no one really cares about the goals can get in the way of really making that impact when you're trying to align the two teams. So picking fewer really meaningful goals that can be measured where both sides agree that the measurement is accurate and honest and meaningful will really create that commonality and that marching toward the same direction, which will align the two groups.
And Ryan, just to add there, I think you and I know this experience from some of our sales and marketing forecasting meetings and things like that, but one truth, right? So the one report that we both work off of, you and I and the rest of the teams, on what are the numbers, right? Because it's always a little bit funky if marketing comes in with a report about leads, right? And nobody can replicate that report. But I think when you and I were in meetings, it's about the revenue. It's the same report, so we know where the source is, and I think that drives a lot of transparency and trust as well.
Absolutely. And it also helps when you're managing your team. So as a sales leader is managing a rep that is coming in and complaining, the classic, marketing isn't giving me enough leads, to be able to open up that single source of truth and say, look, you're not right. They are. Let's dig into what's really going on. And we'll talk about this a little bit later when we start to talk about accountability.
Great. That's great. Yeah, there's a question coming from the audience that I think will sort of probably overlaps the entire conversation. So Paul, thanks for sending it. It's, how do you sort of help align things when, marketing people think that sales is super easy and salespeople think that marketing don't actually know anything about selling or how to have a conversation with people. So I think this is that's sort of a repetitive theme that I see in here constantly. So I'm sure we'll keep addressing that as we continue on. So, let's discuss accountability since you brought it up, and it's the next very next slide. So how would you guys sort of address accountability at this stage of the game?
It's funny because I think it was Paul you said, his question really, I think it stems into this area. And here's the problem that happens, because most people, when they think of accountability, the underlying theme is they think, who is to blame? Who is accountable means who do we go blame? Who do we go ridicule? Who do we go put the screws to when something isn't working? I think it's extremely important that we think about accountability in terms of empowerment versus blame, because blame is like heroin. It might make you feel kind of good, especially if you have something to back it up, but it doesn't do anything. If we can empower our teams, and to Kevin's point of having a single source of truth so that the two groups can sit down together and say, look, there's a problem here. Let's empower the groups to fix the problem, because that's what we really want. We don't want to blame someone. We want to fix and address the problems. So I'd like to think of accountability in terms of empowerment versus even the word accountability.
How does that mean then that, marketing team needs to have an actual revenue goal? Does the sales team need to be held accountable for a conversion goal? Like, let's talk about that a little bit deeper if we could.
So I think the answer to that is that actually yes. And, Ryan and I spent a lot of time on this accountability issue, this topic earlier this week. And I love kind of your point of view on this, Ryan, because I think we have all gone into the sales and marketing meetings feeling defensive. Maybe the numbers aren't quite where we need them to be. I think those meetings are less about finger pointing and assigning blame, like Ryan said, and they're about accepting that as you're in a growing company in a business, there's always going to be challenges, new opportunities, and it's how do you solve them together as a team. And so what we think about between sales and marketing at ActOn, our ultimate goal is revenue. So we're ultimately tied by that goal. So that drives a lot of alignment. But within that, there are 4 or 5 different components of how we drive revenue. Leads are important, but how we convert leads into opportunities or sales-ready, leads. And then how do we convert opportunities into closed deals? That's our close rate, so we look closely at that. And then we look at the average order value. We call that our demand gen equation. And what we do is we look at our performance across all of those pieces of the funnel. That's what really helps us isolate what's working and what's not, and it keeps that alignment going very strong between sales and marketing.
I'd like to ask a little bit more about that, because I had not heard that. Your demand gen equation. Could you maybe describe the components of that again? Because I thought that was a really interesting take on that.
Yeah, so as an example, what we do at the beginning, and we're actually doing this, we just stepped out of a planning meeting here a few minutes ago before the webinar. We sat down with finance. Finance says, here's the target for Q1. And then what we do is we look at, okay, how much of that will be generated from sales, which might be sales generated? Or we would say how much of that is going to be generated through marketing activities like a paid search program or webinars or some other different marketing programs. And then we basically work through this equation and we say, what's our typical average deal size? What percentage of opportunities do we close? What percentage of leads convert into opportunities? And by having those variables, we actually can back into the number of leads that we have. And then we make a number of assumptions on well, our close rates were X. We believe we can get them to Y next year because we've added 2 sales trainers to the 2 offices. That should improve productivity of the sales reps. And those become the numbers in which we build our entire plan and operating budgets on.
Great. And just out of curiosity, you know, one of the things I'd asked a minute ago was about, you know, should sales be accountable to a conversion goal? Is that actually part of their compensation plan, a conversion goal?
So this is a good question. It isn't right now part of the compensation plan. But as you start to manage your teams, and this gets to where technology can help an organization to create better marketing and sales alignment, and that is when you have information that is accurate, that is true, that is easy to understand, and can point to where help might be needed, or to also equally importantly, because of that, going back also to Paul's question, that inherent blame game that goes on to disprove the anti-hype, to show that, no, it isn't a lead issue. It is you're not following up with your leads as quickly as you should be. So having tools and technology in place that is easy to use and easy to adopt, that also is trustworthy, helps you to manage some of those things that you can't necessarily compensate on or build an effective monetary system around.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down too far of a rabbit hole, because I think any salesperson on the phone that says, if you're not going to compensate me on that conversion goal, you know, leave me alone, let me hit my revenue goal. But I do think that there's some value to this from a ratio perspective that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but having a conversion goal is great, but having a conversion ratio is greater. Meaning, you know, great if you converted 50, you know, leads into opportunities, but, you know, at what rate? How much runway did you earn? So I would encourage people, if they're thinking about doing something like that, make sure you look at both the number as well as the quality from a ratio perspective. So
it's a really good point.
Yeah, let me jump in there, because actually, you know, your question, Richard, about sort of being not, you know, a salesperson not being comped on conversions and close rates and things like that, you know, that's not how we want to use it at ActOn. And how we use it at ActOn is we've got a close rate that we believe we can hit based on past performance. And if we have certain reps that are above that, those people almost 90% of the time are overperforming and exceeding their quota. And we learn from them on what they're doing well. And then what we use, those close rates and those conversion rates, for reps that are underperforming, that are below the mean, we can quickly identify something's off there, and we can quickly coach them. Our goal is to make sure everybody hits their number. And so we use that more as a diagnostic, so we can do real-time changes and sort of, you know, education and training, rather than saying you're going to be comped on that specific measure.
That's a really good point, Kevin. And we've also, I've talked to sales professionals that what they also do to help to drive this point is to change consumption rates and lead flow rates based on things like this, right? So maybe your comp plan isn't tied to it, but the number of leads that you get based on how many leads you can handle and how efficient you are at dealing with the current lead volume you have can change, which the rep will put 2 and 2 together. If I'm doing a better job of following up with my leads in a timely fashion, I get more leads, which is going to make it easier for me to hit my number.
Great. A question sort of came in that has a little bit to do with accountability, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it, and thank you, because I know we could probably spend an entire webinar on conversion rates, accountability, and blame, and compensation plans. So we'll stop there. But as you're looking at this from an accountability standpoint and looking at it from, you know, maybe just the metrics version for what marketing might be assigned with, you know, how much web, do you guys look at it from web traffic? Are you looking at it from social media? How are you looking at, you know, assigning the different buckets, I guess, from which the leads might come, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. So I've been with ActOn for a little less than a year. Before that, I had spent about 5 years at ExactTarget and helped the company go public. And one of the things that we did very well at ExactTarget that we've also done here at ActOn is build something called a demand gen portfolio. And essentially, it's anywhere between 7 and 10 different lead sources. So remember when I talked about kind of working backwards from the revenue goal, determining what your lead goal is. When, let's say the lead goal is 100, I'm just making that number up, then what we do is we allocate that lead goal across the different line items of the demand gen portfolio. So social, website, paid search, content syndication, virtual webinars, partners, live events. There's all these different categories. And we actually have specific formulas for each one of those. So if you drove 100 leads from a live event, we typically know what the conversion rate is to opportunity to close and then what the average order value is. And that will be different than, say, content syndication. So we manage that at a very micro level, which just gives us a lot of additional levers to pull and a lot of different diagnostics to figure out what's working and what's not in the business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have a percentage, in a perfect world at this stage, social media is kind of the new marketing to a certain extent, and social selling is certainly a very big topic that I hear about a lot and talk about. Do you guys have an alignment of, we expect a certain number of leads just to straight up come out of social media, in a perfect world, right? Like, I think you guys are pretty advanced in your sales and marketing efforts in terms of, just the sheer size of your company, so you can focus on some of this stuff. But is there a number that you guys, how are you guys addressing social media maybe?
We do. We have a very specific, not only a lead target, we have a revenue target for social media. Some of it is branding, and so we account for that, but we actually have a revenue target because it's one of the line items in our demand gen portfolio. We have a revenue target for our automated programs, and we actually use a pretty sophisticated attribution model. So we do not just first touch or last touch, but we do 2x on the first touch and then equal weight across all the other touches. So it really gives us a good sense of what is the marketing program that brought the lead in, but then how do we move those through from opportunity down to close using some of our automated programs and nurture tracks.
So I'm going to ask you to dumb that down for me because I'm a sales guy. So when you say it's 2x, what do you, 2x of what? Like, can you explain it to the sales guy on the phone?
Oh, got it. Let's say the deal, and I'll make up numbers again, let's say the deal was $100 and the first touch came from social, we would allocate 66 of those dollars to social. And then for all the other marketing touch, so let's say after you came in, you attended a webinar and then you closed the deal, then we would assign the remaining $33 to the webinar. And that gives us a sense of how people move through this buyer's journey, and it helps us allocate our marketing spend across the buyer's journey.
Mm-hmm. So, great. Just out of curiosity, this is another question that sort of popped up, is one of the biggest challenges that I've seen on a regular basis is that, obviously the sales rep wants the lead as soon as someone comes in, right? And marketing's like, well, they're not scored yet, ready. They're not at a score where we should hand it over to sales yet. How do you manage that as part of the SLA, right? Sales wants them immediately, right? As you said, that short-term 45-day goal, and marketing's like, well, let's think strategically.
So we score every single lead that comes in based on some predictive analytics that we use, and then other lead scorings. We have some very sophisticated lead scoring that we use via the ActOn, our product that we actually, our own product, which is kind of fun as a marketer that you get to use your own product. But we lead score in real time, and then those lead score, depending on what the score is, those will actually route directly to sales. So as an example, super high value leads that we know are urgent, that have a high propensity to close, as an example, chat from the website, those get a very high lead score and are immediately routed to somebody on Ryan's team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What if it's a logo you want, right? You see, maybe it's not coming, maybe it's just a white paper download, right? But it's a logo, it's a Fortune 100 logo. How do you keep your sales reps from getting excited? Because as soon as we see those names, we see Nike or Coca-Cola, we're like, I got them, I'll close them. How do you hold those guys back a little bit?
Look, let me jump in and answer that one. So it's interesting because oftentimes this is going to vary company by company that might be on the phone, depending on what their actual lead flow is, right? And it's an expectation management. As long as the expectation of the sales rep is appropriate, the funny thing is what you said is the sales rep wants it right away, but they also want it qualified. They sometimes have an unreasonable expectation. Give me the lead right away, but also make sure they know why I'm calling them. And that's where marketing sometimes gets put into that tough situation of trying to provide them that timeliness of the lead, but also trying to hold back and make sure that the sales reps aren't right afterwards complaining about the quality of the lead. And this is why it's important to have some kind of technology in place to help you score your leads. To your point, there are going to be times where you want to use non-activity-based information to score your lead. Maybe it's by title. Hey, if my target market is the chief financial officer of a company, and I have a CFO that's on this page that normally wouldn't get a high score, let me give it a high score because of the title of the individual that's there. Or maybe it's that target company. Maybe we are going after Nike, and we've been approaching Nike for 6 months, and finally someone from Nike is on that page. Maybe we do want to accelerate that from a scoring and an identification standpoint. So having some technology in place that can help you leverage some non-activity-based information to help you accelerate a lead is an important part of evaluating your lead flow buckets.
How do you guys, this is just a question from me, how do you guys manage sort of the SDR to AE flow? Do you guys have an SDR team that sort of pre-qualifies and sets the appointment, or is the ActOn Software really your SDR team?
So we have an SDR team. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
No, go ahead, Ryan.
We have an SDR team, and this is one of those areas in which Kevin's group is instrumental in helping us to manage both expectations of those two teams. So there are certain leads based on those predictive analytics that Kevin was talking about that we go straight to an RSM and it bypasses the SDR group. RSM being the regional sales manager, that's what we call our sales reps. SDRs being sales development reps, these are appointment setters for the sales reps. So the appointment setters will get leads that are maybe not as qualified, but are ready to be at least initially engaged in a phone conversation. And then we have certain lead categories that we want to send directly over to the sales rep themselves, whether that's by title or by just extreme activity.
Who does, just out of curiosity, because this is, again, something, does the SDR team report into sales or do they report into marketing at ActOn Software?
They actually report into marketing, and we've done that to drive greater accountability on the marketing side to make sure there's better sales and marketing alignment. I call it the Cilantro Problem because I think you either love cilantro or you hate it. And I think when you ask marketers and sales folks where the SDR should sit, I think some people love that it sits in marketing, and I think some people love that it sits in sales. I really do believe it depends on where you are in your stage of company growth and whether or not it will drive the proper amount of alignment that you're seeking.
I would agree with that. Most of the clients that I work with and Sales Hacker works with, the SDRs do fall under the sales team, but the ones where they do fall under marketing, and I've got a handful that I know, it works when they report to marketing as long as there's a super strong SLA between sales and marketing. As long as everybody understands the level of accountability, then it works really, really well. When it comes down to the ego play and who wants to have more headcount reporting to them, that's oftentimes when I see things become a little bit of more of a challenge. So thanks for sharing that your own experience with that. Let's go. So, what are some of the process and cultural issues that play, in the sales and marketing alignment?
Richard, you talked about it before. I think it's a common language, right? It's a common language, and it's around SLAs. And if you don't have a common language where I'm calling it a lead, but Ryan's calling it an opportunity or an MAL or an SQL, I think that's where you really start to get into some of the process challenges across sales and marketing. And so without those processes really nailed down, it really becomes hard to build upon that, execute a great technology program or build marketing automation until you get those pieces settled.
And I agree completely with Kevin. I would like to add on to it to not ignore some of the basic human nature setting and cultural situations that oftentimes happens within an organization. One thing that really helps us here at ActOn is that the marketing department and the sales department sit on the same floor. They're in walking distance. They collaborate with each other. They go have events with each other. They meet with each other. There's constant communication to try to break down the us versus them natural tendency when you separate groups. So I think physical location of your teams is extremely important. I think social engagement and understanding and having a friendship and a kinship with the people from the marketing team and the sales team is important. And certainly technology, process, and goals also are very important. But don't ignore those normal, natural, human nature tendencies when you start to group individuals.
That's great.
I'll add one
What
more
do you-
piece to, well,
Yeah.
let me jump in real quick, Richard, because I know
Yeah.
Ryan actually, this was like a couple months ago, and marketing was building out just a little bit more process and some structure around key areas of the sales cycle. And Ryan asked a really provocative question, and he says, are you implementing this process because it's going to be easier for marketing to track performance? Is it going to be easier for sales and marketing to do their job better? And then more importantly, if you implement this process, will it make it easier for the salesperson to hit his or her number? And I actually feel like that's an important mantra that the marketing side is actually asking ourselves all the time, because there's always a tendency for all of us to over-process things and realize that it might not actually make anybody's life easier. It actually might make their life harder. So we often think about, if we do this, will it make it easier for the sales rep to hit her number? And if the answer is yes, then we go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I teach this a lot too, is that, I always ask people at an early in engagement, if you're going to change X, and usually for me it's a training thing, if you're going to train, at the outcome of this situation, blank, blank, and blank should be better, right? Which I think is what you just said, right? If we're going to do this, this should be better, this should be better, and this should be better. And that to me almost feels like that's where you start as opposed to where you're going to end, right? Like, if we're going to make these changes, what are we expecting those to be? What's our hypothesis going in, rather than waiting to just sort of see what happens? So I think that was really solid advice. I'll ask a question, and I know you guys have been, you're with a larger scale company, and I know you've been with Kevin with the Exact Target, and let's say you're the size of you guys yet, right? Like, maybe you're 20 or 25 employees deep. Maybe you're getting close to 50. You've got a sales team. You've got a marketing team. You get the concept of sitting everybody together and, and having fun and being friends. But where do you start? Where do you start as an early stage company? How do you start the alignment, right? You guys have this experience and wisdom that if you went to somewhere tomorrow that was 25 people only, and you had 3 marketing people and 8 salespeople, how would you start that alignment from that standpoint?
It starts with core values of the company and defining what the core values are to the company and what's important to the company. Because ultimately what that will do is drive decisions around hiring and onboarding people. And if you don't have that nailed down, you're going to hire a bunch of folks who probably aren't going to work together. So biggest challenge I see in early stage companies is that they'll just hire lots of folks because they have to, but there's no consistency across those groups, and it makes it very hard to build that sort of cultural alignment between sales and marketing. So I think it comes back to core values.
So let's change the scenario a little bit. Let's say you're being brought into an organization where it is an established organization. Maybe you're 50, 75, 100 employees, but the alignment between sales and marketing has just been garbage up until now. As either a sales leader or a marketing leader, what would be the things that you would try to do to improve that relationship and change the dogs and cats living together scenario?
I'll jump in on this one, and I think that's a really great question, because sometimes I see it's more difficult for the more established companies that have bigger teams to have that tight marketing and sales alignment, because sometimes when you're a small company, you have one person who is the sales and the marketing person, and if they're not aligned, then they need to see a psychiatrist versus try to get some technology or change process. But to piggyback on what Kevin said, when the company's goals are aligned, it has to start from there, and I think it has to start top down when you're talking about alignment, particularly if you're having a trouble with it as an established organization and you're trying to fix a sales and marketing alignment. If the leaders of those two groups are not in favor of it or not aligned, then it's going to trickle down to the troops. So it has to start with that clear goal, that clear synergistic belief that if we both work together, we're both going to attain our same revenue number, which we're both held accountable to, and again, empowered to. That then begins to trickle itself down to creating processes and cultural and physical alignment between those two groups as well.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go on to the next question. Thanks for sharing that. So, this is one I see all the time, right? Like there's a marketing stack, there's a sales stack, the stacks are now starting to overlap a lot in functionality. How do you, even if you have nothing, you even have that challenge just with Salesforce alone, who gets to control it. How are you guys addressing that issue, or what are you seeing and experiencing?
Yeah, I'll take this one. And by the way, this is I'm from Portland, Oregon. This is one of the brewmasters in Portland after our floods, going down the river in a keg. So
I was in Seattle yesterday. I thought you were following me. It was crazy up there.
So I thought it was symbolic of when you implement a technology, it doesn't quite work. You thought you had a canoe, and next thing you know, you're going down the river in a keg, which may be a good thing. Who knows? But I think to come back to your question, Richard, there's a couple pieces. I think number one, and honestly, like I've made this mistake. We've all made it. Marketing will make some decisions around technology spend without including sales, or vice versa. So make sure if you're making a purchase like marketing automation that's really around marketing and sales, make sure you've got marketing and sales involved. I think that's number one. I think number two, we've talked about this a lot, goals, so I won't talk much more about it. But number three, I think common definitions, right? So if you are going to implement something like marketing automation, make sure you've got some common language, some common definitions. If you don't have a common process in place, that's where you got to start. Otherwise, you just won't be as successful in what you're trying to do.
And I'll add to... I'm sorry, Richard. I was going to say what I'd add to that, and I think Kevin really summed it up very, very well, is that the issue that I see most commonly with implementing a new technology isn't that new technology. It's the failures of trying to implement past technologies and the resistance from people that have tried or struggled or did something that was promised to them that didn't end up actually working. So I think the other thing that's important to do, in addition to having, say, if you're talking marketing automation and you want both sales and marketing buy-in, but you also need to make sure you have user buy-in. The people that you're relying on to use the systems that you're trying to implement, because even if everything from a high level is right online and the users never use and adopt, and you don't have processes to ensure that the users use and adopt, the technology that you're implementing will never work.
Yeah, I see this a lot too, is that I was actually talking to someone this week about this, and we were trying to define what is a disruptive technology, and we sort of came to the conclusion that a disruptive technology is a technology that helps the doer do something better, not the VP of marketing do something better, but the person who's actually going to implement Marketo. If it makes that person's job better and easier, then that's when you've got a disruptive technology. And I think that aligns perfectly with what you were saying there, Ryan. So that's a really great one. The other thing that I've seen, and again, you tell me too, is that, I feel like sometimes people will buy the technology and they treat it like a car. It's like, look, we can all go buy a brand new car and get in the car and drive it off the lot, right? We all know how to do that. And it's almost like people think that Marketo is that simple or Salesforce is that simple. And what happens is they don't actually dedicate the resource to actually even understanding the technology they bought to implement it, And so I'm curious, is that part of what you're seeing, Ryan and Kevin, as well?
Yes, it is. And let's be frank, sometimes the solution you're buying is just difficult. You mentioned a couple that might be in that category that are just difficult. And so having also an understanding of the resources that are absolutely actually needed versus taking that sales reps, and now I'm going on record, Kevin went on record earlier, but I'm going on record. Sometimes sales reps will tell you that something does something a little better than it really does it and is easier than it really is. So getting that true sense of what it's going to take to truly implement whatever technology you're trying to implement and have a realistic expectation and a realistic rollout time frame.
Mm-hmm. I agree. This is a question that is coming from the audience. It's the beautiful thing about SaaS in general is just, there's so many cutting edge technologies and so many amazing tools out there. However, at some point, and every one of them makes us more efficient, right? They really do. They make us move faster. But at some point, 7 tools actually slows you down. Do you expect to see consolidation to start to happen where certain tools that do these two things and starting to overlap, someone's either going to fail because they're going to run out of money or someone's going to buy someone? Like, are you starting to see that at your level as you look across the horizon?
Yeah, I'll take this. I think over the last couple of years, we've all been familiar by how many marketing tech and sales tech companies and software solutions are out there in the marketplace. And I think that growth is only going to increase. I think marketing is becoming, more and more difficult because the consumer's in charge and they're mobile. So I actually expect over time that you'll continue to see more and more different technologies out there. And the way that I kind of see it playing out in the marketplace is that companies will often have like a couple of centers of gravity around technology, like different platforms, but individual users may be using very specific products. So the person in social might be using a tool or a solution to manage Pinterest analytics. I doubt that ever gets rolled up into a larger platform. So I always think that there's going to be very specific end uses or use cases that end users will take. And I also think that in time there'll be a couple of larger platforms within companies.
You don't think, I challenge that a little bit. You don't think that there will be a tool that can measure your Pinterest, your Twitter, your Facebook, and create alignment, one within the silo of that social media piece, but then across all three as a whole? You don't think that that'll occur? You think that even Pinterest will have its own analytics? You don't think the APIs will be open?
But I think therein, in your question lies the challenge, because once we solve Pinterest analytics or Facebook analytics, there's going to be 3 new networks that emerge that suddenly require new technologies or new experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been, if you look actually at B2B companies and some, not necessarily B2B, but B2C companies, most have embarked on multi-year, hundreds of million-dollar projects to consolidate all their data, and they can't get it done. And it remains to be one of the biggest unsolved challenges, I think, in software right now, is that people can't do it because the market evolves and there's so many different sources of data and technology.
Sources of data and technology. When do you see literally the title of an analyst coming? I'm starting to see it a little bit in SaaS organizations where you're literally hiring like the Wall Street analyst to come in and look at this data as opposed to someone who's a marketing guru. Right? Have you started to experience that as the data just gets bigger and bigger?
We actually have a guy named Brian on our team who's a data scientist. I mean, he's truly a data scientist and Brian, you know Brian, he's awesome. He does work for sales and for marketing, and the quality of work that he does is absolutely remarkable. So he's indispensable to our team. He is a data scientist. He's not necessarily a marketing or a sales guy. So when we pair him up with a marketing person or a salesperson, and we get the power of that data science, the insights that we get from him are just amazing.
Great. So with all this marketing automation, this is another question coming up, and I hear it all the time. Are things like automated sales even worth it? And more importantly, do you guys think that cold calling is dead?
The question broke up just a touch there, Richard, if you'll repeat it for the group and for the recording.
Yeah, my apologies. From your perspective, with all this automation that's going on, do you think cold calling is a thing of the past?
I think it's cold calling will never die entirely. You see article after article, and it's utopia for the salesperson, because even though every salesperson in an interview tells you to your face that they love cold calling, salespeople don't like it. And effectiveness weighs and peaks during certain cycles. But what you're seeing now with technologies like marketing automation is a change in the cold call and a redefinition of the cold call. The cold call, in basic terms, means I'm calling someone that has never talked to me before. But when you have some analytics at your disposal and you can see what that person is engaging with, you can see what they're browsing, you can see what content they're consuming, you have a very different conversation during that quote-unquote cold call than you would if you were just picking up the phone and dialing through a phone book. So I think from that sense, it's being redefined, but I don't think that the true cold call will ever go away unless you're such a well-established company that everyone knows your brand and they're calling you.
Yeah, let me give my perspective. Let me give my perspective as a marketer, because I get a lot of cold calls every single day. I get emails every single day from lots and lots of vendors. And it's my job actually to figure out what new technologies are out there that can help me solve certain problems. and use those new technologies to get a leg up and a competitive advantage in the marketplace. So I actually like cold calls and emails. I won't give out my phone number because I don't want too many, but I like them when they're relevant. And there are really good cold calls and there are really good emails. And I think what I would describe the cold calls is not really cold calls, but educated, almost like consulting calls where people will leave me a 30-second or a 1-minute message. It's actually very compelling. And when I call them back, I actually learn something. Those to me are valuable. And if a salesperson does those right, I think they'll get callbacks all the time.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot in training, and the things that are shifting in cold calling or cold emailing is personalization and relevance. And really the B2B sale, if you're in the cold calling, actually has a B2C component, meaning that if I'm going to sit here and try and email or call the CEO of Coca-Cola, you're not going to hear me say, "Hi, this is Richard. I'm calling from," because I know that's exactly what everybody else is doing. It has to be compelling, as you said. It can't be interesting. It's got to be compelling. So it needs to be personal. So, the B2B sale is truly, in my opinion, shifted to a B2C case from what I've seen.
And Richard, if I can jump in and just add one piece to that, because you're both right on line, and just one last layer. What makes it compelling is value. The clear value to the person that is being called. If you are leaving a message, an email, or you're having an initial talk track where the value you're bringing to Kevin or the value you're bringing to the person that you're calling is clear, it will be compelling. If you're not bringing value, it will never be compelling. And this is where marketing automation and seeing what that person is consuming can really aid in that process, because you have a really strong educated guess on what is going to be valuable and thus what will be compelling when you approach that person.
Right. I've got another question coming from Michael in the audience, and I certainly have an answer, but obviously it's your webinar, so I'll let you answer it. But how much time should pass between the initial contact and a follow-up? And I'm going to put a couple of parameters around that. One, I would say whether it's an inbound, right, initial contact, coming from the suspect or the prospect, and then how much time should pass, and then on an outbound per se, let's say you do have a list of people that your reps are calling on. How much time do you think goes in between?
Yeah, let me answer this, because this reminds me of my days back at Exact Target when it was an email. People said, "What's the best time of day to send an email?" And somehow people had determined it was Tuesday right before lunch. Well, guess what everybody did? They sent their email Tuesday right before lunch, and suddenly Tuesday night wasn't the best day. And then we were talking with a jeweler, and they said some of the best open rates they get were when they send notes out on Sunday night or Saturday night. So my answer to the question is, I think you as a company want to test and experiment, build a tester, like a culture of testing and optimization, test out different options. I really do believe there's some parameters of like it needs to be within 48 or 72 hours or something, but I think every company is different, and you really need to figure out a way to test it to figure out what's best for you as a company.
And what I'll say is, especially when you're talking about someone is showing some interest, and you've identified that this is hot interest, because hot interest gets cold extraordinarily rapidly. And so I would much rather, as I'm looking at a sales team, I would rather lose a deal because the sales rep called too much than lose a deal because we waited too long. And I'll tell you, when we run our numbers, we don't lose deals very often because we called too much. And the question that was before, which is should there be a compensation around conversion and around the timeliness of a rep following up with a lead? So I would always err on the side of more follow-up, particularly when that prospect is showing genuine interest.
So I'm gonna add a couple of things that I teach on a regular basis onto this one. The one on an inbound lead, I would say you need to call them, not email. I mean, you should email them, but on an inbound lead, you should reach out to them and connect with them within 60 to 180 seconds. So you've got about 1 to 3 minutes, because here's what you know. They're by their phone or they're right by their computer. And if they're by their computer, they're by their phone. That's assuming you have the phone number. Now, what you want to do is not be creepy about it and make sure your message is tight and make sure that you are respectful of them. But the studies have actually shown, I've seen a couple of different organizations run studies on this, that literally after 5 minutes, the conversion rate drops off ridiculously because you waited too long. So on the inbound. The other thing that I would say too, and you know, we've all mentioned it, is please, everybody who's listening, stop saying reach out, touch base, follow up. There's no reason to ever say those words again. All that means is you don't know what to say. What you need to be doing, very simply, is saying, hi, the reason for my call today is, and if you can't fill in the blank, you shouldn't be calling them. It's that simple. It's a tough thing to break, but I promise you, get rid of reach out, touch base, checking in, following up, any of those phrases. They're just wasted words. Let's go on. I think we've got actually one more slide and about 5 minutes left. So how do you manage the trifecta of process, culture, and technology for alignment? I think we've kind of hit on it all the way through, but you know, how would you sort of summarize all of that?
Yeah, I'll just do a real quick answer here. I think Ryan said it already, but it really comes from the top down. And I think if the head of marketing and the head of sales are aligned, and then everything else can fall into place. But if those two folks aren't aligned, then I think you really have trouble in making sure that you get the process, culture, and technology all straightened out.
And to add on to that, from a process of spending some time, don't ignore that middle one, culture. Don't ignore location of the individuals. If you've got your marketing team sitting in a different building entirely than your sales team, no matter how aligned you are from top, no matter how aligned your process is, there is going to be some division. So have an approach for all three of those. Have a process approach for alignment, have a cultural approach for alignment, and also have a technology approach for alignment. And if you do the three, you're going to notice much better alignment between your groups, and the payoff is more revenue. So it's definitely worth the effort.
Awesome. So, as a marketer, what do you say when the sales team is saying, you're not producing enough leads? How do you guys manage that? Because, now we're back to that blame game we started with today.
There's always going to be that question, and the question will take the form of, we don't have enough leads, the quality isn't enough. So what I always try to really understand is what the core issue is, because it just might in fact be that we're not generating enough leads. But if you look at the entire demand generation equation and the ultimate goal, which is revenue, that'll tell us if lead flow is adequate or not. More often than not, what I find when sales is asking that we might be at a macro level generating the right number of leads, but there might be a region or a team where lead flow is light, and then we can go out and correct those problems.
And I would add and expand on one really important thing that Kevin said right there. And this is why, when we talked about earlier, why it's important to have a single source of truth and to make sure that you've got true, accurate, simple, and meaningful goals. Because if you also have measurement around it, you can sit down and you can say, hey, if a sales rep is saying it, is it true? That's simple first. Let me look and see if it's true. And this usually comes to the sales manager, who should handle it first. And if you have true alignment, this doesn't get its way back to marketing if it's not true. The sales rep complains to the sales manager. The sales manager goes and pulls open the document, and they show that they had plenty of leads, and the issue was that they didn't call them within the first 3 minutes. They waited 3 days. And now it's a management issue where you remove that from being an excuse. If it is true, you empower the teams to be able to identify where the drop-off is so you can go fix it, as opposed to blaming someone for a lack of revenue or a lack of results.
Yeah, right. And Ryan, you and I deal with this all the time because it's just part of the game. It's part of what we do. And, I think actually, a fair bit, like what I see oftentimes from, this company and other companies I've been a part of, like an Exact Target, when there is a lead flow issue, it's usually not equally distributed across. So like the West region might be getting more leads than the East. And so it's just it requires marketing to do a little bit of more work there. So that I want to make sure it's just not always a sales problem, because occasionally marketing, and sometimes marketing will be, a position where it needs to drive more of those leads.
Exactly. That empowerment of being able to identify, A, if it's true, and if it is true, to make sure that you can put resources into fixing the problem versus assigning blame.
Awesome. So I think we've got one more question. Sorry. And this may, it's the flip of that, which is, what do you say when marketing sales sales isn't properly following up the leads that are provided. I think we may have answered it, but if there's something you want to add here, please feel free to jump in and do so.
This is why you want to have systems that communicate effectively with each other. The idea of having your marketing systems and your sales systems and that you have alignment from both groups makes this much easier to manage through. Because oftentimes, like we said before, this is just a management issue. This is taking a look at what's in front of us to identify if it's true. And if it is true, go in and correct the problem and empower the right people with the right information and the right tool set to address the problem as opposed to assign blame.
Great. Awesome. Well, I think we're actually at the very end. So here's some contact information for ActOn if you guys are interested in following up with them. This is their phone number. If you ever have a question for me, you can always reach me at richard@saleshacker.com. Again, it's richard@saleshacker.com. Happy to answer any questions. I do know that there will be a recording of this for those who maybe joined in late. I know we'll also have the survey going out that ActOn put together over the year. And we really, really appreciate everybody taking some time out of their busy December. Hope everybody has a great end of the year, an end of the quarter, and a safe and happy holiday to everyone. So everybody, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.